Welcome to the CSMI radio broadcast, Today's Christian Music with James Burkhardt.
Well, hello and welcome to Today's Christian Music, a service of the Christian Songwriters and Musicians International. I'm James Burkhardt, your host, and with me is Mr. Addison Horner. How are you, Addison?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Well, it's a pleasure. So, your last project, it's been about, what, a year since you came out with that, year and a half?
About a year and a half, yeah, about a year and a half.
Yeah, and the new project is called Supertonic Duo.
That's right.
That has a very intriguing title. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so it's all just kind of a big pun on the number two, basically. And so what we are is a piano-cello duo, and so obviously duo too. And then supertonic is a musical term for the note above the tonic. So the tonic is 1, the supertonic is 2. So basically our name is 2-2. And I wanted something that would be catchy enough, but unique enough to kind of get listeners' attention so they'd watch our videos, listen to our music, and then get what we're about.
So how long have you known the person who plays the cello?
Yeah, so Abigail Collins is the cellist, and I have known her since I started this project. And so I actually just met her for this process because I was looking for a cellist in Orlando. I was Googling, asking friends for references, trying to find these people, and I found her website, talked to her, and she has a lot of common connections I found out. And so we just kind of started talking, and I asked her if she'd be interested in doing this project with me. And she was kind of like, I don't really know you that well, but sure. And so we tried it out, and it's been a lot of fun ever since.
And is it primarily instrumentals? Are you doing any vocal work? Or
so far it's all instrumental. Now, especially as we start performing and doing more, we'll see about playing around with more, but right now it's just piano and cello is how we're doing it.
Beautiful. Now, a lot of people don't really know how good of a vocal arranger you are.
Oh, well, thank you.
Have you been doing much with that?
Gosh, let me think. So vocal arrangements, a little bit. I do a cappella arrangements every semester for a cappella groups and stuff. So I've done some of that this semester, and I've been doing a little bit of that kind of constantly on and off. I also teach a vocal performance group called Tourbox at my music studio. And so, yeah, I do vocal arrangements for them a lot. But lately I've been doing more string arrangements, especially with this cello stuff. We've been doing a lot of videos with pianos and then doing some stuff with multiple cellos as well. And so we have one coming out pretty soon that's going to have, I think, like 12 different cellos on it in addition to the piano.
Wow. That sounds really great. So are you investigating the whole classical side of music rather than the pop side, or
kind of,
what directions are you going in?
Yeah, so the direction with this project, if I wanted to put it in a single sentence, would be we are going to be Orlando's version of the Piano Guys. And so we're not going to imitate exactly what they do, but their whole aesthetic of having this piano-cello duo, having this interesting music with this pop and classical crossover, that's the idea we're doing, and we're going to take that and turn that into a performance group that can perform venues across Orlando and then potentially tour and do performances further out into the Southeast and beyond.
Great. Are many of the instrumentals inspirational in nature?
So some of them are. We're doing a mix of spiritual and secular. And so we've done some kind of pop classical mashups and covers so far, but we also have, for example, a version of Be Thou My Vision. We did our first live gig, so to speak, at a worship service at a church here in Oviedo a few weeks ago. And so we did that Be Thou My Vision, trying out our first kind of custom arrangement. It was really well received. So we're definitely going to try to do more of those.
Wow. That's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, how would you augment this in the studio? Is it just the two of you and no other instruments, no other overdubbing or anything like that? Or
yeah, so that's a subject of great experimentation on my part. And so we have 2 videos out so far on YouTube. One of them is just piano and cello, which we recorded separately and all that stuff in the studio, and I mixed it all together. And the other one is it's a mashup of Skyfall by Adele and Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. And that song is actually has 1 piano and then I think 6 or 7 cellos, in addition to having some synthetic strings in the background as like a support that I arranged, and then also a drum kit as well to fill out the sound.
Okay, so are you playing the strings on a synthesizer?
Yes. Yep, yeah. I got my little, oh, I can't pull that out because of my microphone. I got my little MIDI keyboard right down here. And so I do a lot of the arranging work on there while I'm recording.
Sure. So this seems to be a totally different direction from your
Yeah,
first recording, which was just extremely wonderful pop and
thank you.
very commercial radio ready and all that sort of thing.
Thank you. That's really
Where do you
kind.
think this is going to take you?
That is also an excellent question. So my hope with all these projects, I started so many projects and some that kind of start off and never go anywhere, others like this that are kind of gaining some momentum, which is great. And my hope for this is that we actually take it and it becomes a regular thing, like a full-time thing. Maybe sure, that'd be great, but I mean, we both have Abigail and myself both have full-time jobs teaching, teaching music lessons and doing performances and all this kind of stuff. But if we can get a chance to perform around the Orlando area, to play in churches, to go tour around and perform other places as well, it's a great way to just live the touring performing musician life, and get out there. And so I see it as a way of just kind of exploring the this love I have for kind of the classical style of playing that's very different than what I typically do on a day-to-day basis with my teaching, with my performing as well. So it's just going to be kind of a side thing that could potentially become something more. I mean, if you start a project and it takes off, you keep investing in that project. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well, I have an idea for you putting my music business hat on. You
Yeah,
want to hear
sure.
it?
I do.
Make a Christmas album with just you and the cello.
Hmm. You know what? I don't think I've really heard that because the Piano Guys have done a like Christmas album in the past. I know and they've got this stuff, but I think we could do something different. That's actually really interesting, and it's about the right time to start working on that.
Correct.
So
You'll
yeah,
be done by October, ready for the market, you know?
it's funny. I've been putting together all these ideas for songs and videos and all this stuff we're gonna do, and I haven't actually even considered a Christmas album yet. So I really appreciate that. I'll give you a 0.01% cut of the proceeds for the idea.
Yeah. Well, I don't need it, but I don't know if I've told you this. I haven't really revealed it to the audience either. But
Really?
in November, I was appointed president of Orphaned Heart International,
Oh wow!
which
Congratulations.
is a ministry. So if you would like to be a patron for Orphaned Heart, that would be most appreciated. And the website is orphanedheart.org.
Orphanedheart.org. That sounds
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's orphan with an ed and then heart.org. So,
Wonderful.
but this isn't about what I'm up to. But if you're
Yeah,
going to make an offer like that, I had to say, send it to the ministry, please.
definitely. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
really worthy.
but the musical possibilities where the cello could take the place of the voice, the human voice, on some of
Hmm.
these very familiar hymns, and probably some unfamiliar ones if you delve back into the Celtic era, and a lot of where these Christian carols, Christmas carols, have come from.
Hmm.
There's a whole interesting, line of songs that came from like the year 1800 to 12 or 1300 that
Yeah.
that would fit that instrumentation very, very well. And
Oh yeah.
might be I know how a great creative mind you have. So
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to make that suggestion now that I heard enough about what you were doing, that it might point you in a direction that could be very successful for you.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It sounds like a niche that hasn't really been filled.
Yeah. Well, beyond this project, uh, what are you thinking about getting into next?
Oh, everything, to put it all condensed it into one thing. Yeah, so I mean, my work day to day and week to week, month to month is just a hodgepodge of different things, teaching and producing and trying out these ideas. And so I'm working with some social media experimentation right now. One thing I did take on lately is I am taking on this interim position as the traditional worship leader for a church here at Novito. And
Cool.
so over the summer, I'll be working with that group, and that's going to give me a chance to explore some new musical ideas, to work with the choir, and to try out some new projects as well. So I'm sure some more inspiration and some things will come from that as I explore that job.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that?
Well, it starts officially later in May, and so
Oh, okay.
it's basically helping out a friend and essentially not replacing him because he can never be replaced, but taking his job after he moves. And so I'm really excited to get a chance to work with this choir and try out a new adventure that's a little unfamiliar, but still pretty exciting.
Yes, well, given how well you are at arranging a cappella voices, I can just imagine how this choir is going to get raised up to a couple new levels.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to see what we could do.
Yeah, well, one of the nice things about music that it's a very evolutionary process,
Hmm.
and it's not the same old thing over and over and over. We keep finding new ways to express and be creative and reach new audiences. So, I think you're in the right place doing the right thing for sure.
Well, thank you. So I don't know if you know this, but the first thing I ever put on Spotify was actually a solo piano EP. This was way back in 2017. I was pretty much fresh out of college. I
Yeah.
was recording on this in this big, really reverberant room on this grand piano in a house that I was renting a room in at the time. And so it's if you go back and listen to it, it's called Clarity EP on Spotify. It's different
Okay.
because it's not singer songwriter at all, but it's got this different feel, and it's kind of this part of this evolution of this process where I look back and it's like, oh, I want to do all these things differently, and so now I have a chance to do these things better.
That's awesome. That, some of these home recordings just have turned out to be masterpieces, throughout the centuries. So,
Hmm. We'll see if I can get there.
yeah, well, that's awesome. So, are you still playing a little bit of guitar?
Yeah, I do a lot actually. So this weekend's a good example. We do recitals every semester for the school I teach at, and so I am going to be playing probably 25 or 30 songs, singing, playing guitar, playing piano for this stuff, and it's always a great way for me to do a double check on my skills. Like I haven't performed a lot in a while, but I've done a decent amount of worship leading recently. And so it's a kind of a different thing for me to check, okay, how are my chops doing? How's everything going? Because I'm always playing in the studio and stuff, but getting out in front of people and doing it is always a different animal. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
playing a pretty decent amount of piano and guitar and singing and all that stuff.
Well, that's really great because being multi instrumentalists, it's sometimes hard to stay up on every instrument that you're trained on. And
Hmm.
you don't want to drop one, but I can see as a worship leader, um, you may want to play some guitar every now and then, but I also see you as being a conductor.
Hmm.
Have, have you done that role a lot, or you're just directing?
Actual conducting, I have
Yeah.
very rarely actually done, and so that's going to be something I'll be doing regularly is with this new job leading a choir, and so I know how it works, and so it's something I've done before. But the difference between like directing a singing group and then actually conducting a live like performance, it's a very different kind of feel, and so I'm looking forward to having that experience as we do
Yeah.
this summer. Another tool for the tool belt.
Yeah. Well, it's an experience, believe me, and it's a skill that you'll certainly be doing well with. Sorry about that.
All good.
I thought I turned my phone down, but anyway. So, if you were to paint your ideal environment for writing a song,
Mhm.
what would that look like?
Man, it's tricky, partially because I feel like I've never quite had it. But if I had to dream of like, if I'm going to take this time, if I'm going to take a writing retreat, go for a weekend anywhere in the world and create this place with all the details I'd want, honestly, I would say first off, the mountains. Definitely, I'd go to the mountains. I would find a place where I can see the horizon, find a place where I can see the mountains in the distance and see this. And I would remove all these distractions and create a place of absolute peace. And even though I usually write on a computer, I would take this opportunity to go switch to just pen and paper, bring in a guitar. I mean, a keyboard too, if I can, but definitely a guitar because I can bring out all the ideas and hear all the parts of my mind as I'm just fiddling around the guitar. So yeah, find a place without these distractions, without this stuff. Get distance from the responsibilities and the pressures of everyday life to create a place where just creation can kind of come through and inspiration can strike.
Well, that's great because I see you as a person who's got a whole plethora of songs that are just dying to come out.
Yeah, I've got a nice beefy folder on my computer with all of these Microsoft Word files and recordings and demos on Logic and all this stuff.
And how many are in that barrel at the moment?
Huh. So one thing I've been doing regularly with some of the songs I'm writing is I have a Patreon page. It's not a big thing. I haven't made a big thing out of it yet, but I release a song on there every month, and so it keeps me accountable to keep writing, to keep producing, to keep trying new ideas. And so over the past 2 years, I've got about 20 original songs on there that are currently available if you become a patron. It's on patreon.com/Addison Horner. Got to plug it for the audience. And so, but if you check that out, you'll be able to see every month I'm releasing a new song. I do different styles. I do different things. I've done some of the Supertonic Duo stuff on there as well. And it's a great chance for me to explore like my songwriting stuff. Like my latest song on there, Revenge, is all about these ideas of like revenge, hate, and forgiveness, how that works in our culture. And it came from the verse. I want to say it's Second Timothy, but don't quote me on that, where it talks about the dangers of believers who essentially bite and devour each other through arguments, through infighting, through all of this stuff. And so kind of writing about that tendency and that desire myself when I see somebody I disagree with who's a believer, my tendency to like, I'm going to prove you wrong, I'm going to put you down, but it's not Christ-like, right? It's not representative of who we're called to be. And so learning how to stay away from the roads of revenge and hate and how to stay on the path of forgiveness, which is very difficult and something I have not figured out, but it's a process, right? And I think it's a process for all of us. But that I write songs exploring stuff like that, and I'm putting them out every month on Patreon.
That's wonderful. I'm wondering, have you done a lot of listening to like the old big band songs and some of the, the old vocal arrangements like the Mills Brothers or groups like that that have performed with big orchestras or, big brass bands?
I've done a little bit. I have to say, I've not done a lot of listening with the combination of big band and vocals. Because for me, when I think about like the really complex and interesting vocal arrangements of the past 50, 60 years, I think about anywhere from like boy bands in the 90s to like Carpenters and Beach Boys and all this really incredible lush stuff. And so that's really where my ear goes when I think about those vocal arrangements.
Yeah, well, the harmonies are great, and I know you're a real good harmony kind of thinking person, and just from watching some of your videos where you would do some of the old Glad stuff, and love it, just absolutely love it.
Yeah, well, thanks. That was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, in terms of the people that you're reaching, are you able to reach your peers very well, your age group and those in the generation right behind you?
So you're talking about with my just like the singer-songwriter stuff, like my core like music, or just in general with all the stuff I'm doing?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean,
Yeah, well, I think there's some level of reach. I mean, like with my peers, for example, I see that, and I'm writing about stuff that resonates, and so like I'm not some big artist, right? I have a very small reach, but the people who do see it, with whom it resonates, I do see that with like my peers, people my age. With the younger generations, I haven't seen a lot of that yet, and that's mainly because my stuff is not usually on the levels that they are accessing. For example, I don't have a lot of my original stuff on TikTok, for example, and I have some stuff like on Instagram that like my students will see it and they'll like it and they'll think the music is interesting and stuff. But going beyond that is not an area I've really delved into yet, and that's something I'm interested in doing because I mean that's you think about like the youth in the church, like they're not the future of the church, they are the church, and the youth in America and the world beyond are they are what our world is going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years. And so if there's a message I feel like is worth spreading, then I think it's worthwhile to try to make sure that they can hear it and they can discuss it. And not for me to be like somebody saying, hey, here's what you need to believe, here's what needs to happen, but like me saying, let's have these conversations and let's open up what it looks like to live in this world and to bring Christ into that.
Yeah, well, you've got, you mentioned TikTok. I mean, that's a great place to reach that crowd, that audience, and then Instagram, of course. But then you've also got Snapchat, which tends to reach even younger people.
Yeah, and I gotta confess, I deleted Snapchat off my phone like 2 years ago, and I've not looked back since. And I think there's definitely a place there. I don't know if that's the place for me. I want to find my the place I want to go, and I want to make sure I can focus on doing what I know.
Well, I look at you and I think you're such a creative person. that if you were to even experiment with some children musicals or something like that, you might find it very fulfilling.
Now, it's actually really funny you bring that up. So, two things that makes me think about. One, I worked as a preschool music teacher at a Presbyterian church a few years back, which was an incredibly fun job, but I ended up leaving just because of scheduling and things. But I wrote a lot of original music for them, and I've toyed with the idea of actually doing like a children's record with that kind of stuff, with some inspirational music. And then beyond that, actually, this is actually fun news because it's just confirmed recently. I have a musical that I've written that's being performed by a Christian theater in North Carolina in October, which I'm very excited for.
And what's the title of that?
It's called Gatsby, A Prodigal Story. And this is essentially, it's a mashup of The Great Gatsby, the F. Scott Fitzgerald classic novel, with the story of the prodigal son. And so it's taking that that story, that kind of foundational like American story, and it's mixing up the characters, some mixing up the story, and presenting this picture of God's grace, God's love and forgiveness through the lens of Great Depression in America.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I just kind of see you as, because your music tends to be so hummable and and everything. It has this innocence about it that I think if you really looked at doing something aimed at kids, and with all the homeschooling that's going on in this day and age, I think there's a big market for it because most parents aren't musical. And that's one thing that, you know, I, as a former music teacher, I'm a little concerned that children are not getting exposed to music. And it's been a decline in the educational system for many, many years. But,
Yeah.
you could step in there and fill a big void, you know, just,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's something I see a lot because, like, as a music teacher, I see a lot of parents, and I teach mainly in kind of like I'd say the demographics in the area I teach are, and it's Florida, and Orlando, and so it's this is mainly, so demographically mostly white, mostly Republican, mostly middle class, and that itself is not an up or a down, right? But what this
right.
means is a lot of times I see these families, and essentially they're looking for something for the kids to do, so they do music lessons. And sometimes they were like, hey, we really want a kid to learn about music and grow in the skill and enjoy it and use it to glorify God and this stuff. And sometimes it's just, I want my kid to be busy on Tuesday afternoons so that I don't have to pick them up from school right away, or I can pick them up and drop them off and not worry about it for half an hour. And so it's not about this learning thing, right? And there's all this stuff about like the decline of pianos being in homes and that kind of thing. There's way less pianos in homes than there were even 20 years ago, or let alone
Sure.
50 years ago. And so, yeah, I think there's a place for that to step in. And that's what I'm hoping by writing musicals. This is my first one. I'll be writing more for sure. And releasing these songs, I think there is a place to reach children with just good music with good message. I think that's of paramount importance, I would say.
Yeah, and especially with the internet, you know, you're talking about just Central Florida.
Mhm.
You could be international.
Yeah. You find the audience. You put
Yeah,
it out there and you find the audience and you figure out what's working and figure out who needs to hear this.
exactly. Well, that's exciting. How is your spiritual life doing as a worship leader? What kind of additional responsibilities are you feeling other than the musical ones?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting journey for me. So my wife and I, we left our home church that we were at here for a few years. We left that church in fall 2019, I believe. This was just like a few months before the pandemic. And since then, it's been a really fascinating spiritual journey as we've gone to different churches, as I've been leading and participating regularly at this church, and being in community with different leaders and seeing all this stuff. I found that that faith journey, like, it's so much harder and different than I thought it'd be as a kid. It seems so simple, right? And so for me, I found that it's a process of a lot of things. So for me, it's been learning how to be in scripture without the pressure of like, I have to do this, learning how to enjoy it, learning how to be in prayer with honesty, not trying to find just the right words, of focusing on being honest with God and looking for his guidance and looking for his companionship. And then also, honestly, therapy, having a Christian counselor I've talked to who's been able to work through just the stuff in life with me, has been incredibly helpful because it helps me to not, honestly, it's helped me not walk away from my faith, which would not be because, oh, believing X or Y. It would happen if I did, because of I'm so worn out by all this stuff and by the stuff happening in the church and the stuff happening in society. But having people to talk to, having this honest communication with God and staying open to what he has for me has been a big part of that process throughout. And especially when I'm actually with the worship team or whatever, that becomes even more important because I'm communicating that and leading by example in that way with the team.
Well, it's very interesting because as a creative individual, some of the challenges we face as being creatives are a lot different than people that aren't as right-brained as we tend to be. And it's really good that you have a support system, because you mentioned the Beach Boys. You look at the life of Brian Wilson, and even though he was a musical genius, he grew up in a rather abusive situation, which kind of pushed him into being creative. But there were a lot of hangups he had, and he sought out counseling, and I think he's had some very sound counseling the last 20 years of his life. But there was a period there when the Beach Boys were at their peak, when the counselor he had wasn't quite so interested in Brian's well-being as much as his own professional benefit, I guess. But anyway,
Yeah.
But it's interesting as a worship leader. I've always thought that my job as a worship leader, when I was doing it, was to usher in people into the presence of God. And that's why you're the leader. They follow the leader. And, once the Holy Spirit is there and there's an anointing all over the room, you just kind of relax and worship, and you're actually become part of the corporate experience, just like a normal person.
Yeah. And to
But
me,
you just helped initiate it or facilitate it. And that was it.
And I love that term. I've seen that term in a book before. I think it was by Mike Cosper, a book I read called Rhythms of Grace. I could be completely wrong. Might not be from that book at all. But this term of worship facilitator, I thought was absolutely fascinating because it's this idea of I'm not just like, I help you worship and that's it. That's a piece of it. But it's like, this has got to be worship for me as well. Because otherwise, what is it? I get on stage, I perform, and I leave, and I haven't been able to participate in what God is doing. And
Right.
So it's got to start with that worship, and I can't go in from a place of being like, I'm going to help you out because I've got this all figured out, or I don't need the stuff that you guys on the floor need. It's got to be communal.
Yeah. And that's the thing, the biggest challenge is how not to be a performer, but to be a worshiper.
Sometimes. Yeah. How do you perform play with excellence and lead with excellence and pursue musical creativity and a high standard without compromising on the fact that this is an act of worship, and learning how not to get, for me, I get caught up in my mistakes, right? If I play a wrong chord, if I flub a note, if I miss a cue, and I will get caught up in, oh, this was a bad worship experience for everybody because I played the C instead of the D. And it's like, I get so caught up in that I don't pay attention to, like, okay, this is a worship experience, and everything, even my mistakes and my flaws and my shortcomings, are part of this worship, because that's what God takes from me in this salvation process. I bring him what I have, which is good and bad all mixed together in this stuff, like the filthy rags, right? Even my righteousness is filthy rags, but God takes all that, makes it beautiful. And so if I can let go of this desire to perform to this high standard and just play with the high standard and trusting God to carry it through for his purposes, that's all I can do. And that's something I can do with joy because the pressure is not on me. I just get to do what I love and do it for a God who loves me.
Yeah. Well, to me, we bring a gift to God whenever we're worshiping. And it doesn't matter if it's a very proficient gift or not. What matters is the intention of the gift. And sometimes, you have to just sit back and tell yourself, it's really all about him.
Mm-hmm.
not about me. No one's really listening to me. They should be listening to him. And once you get beyond that, it gets a lot easier to,
Mm-hmm.
to participate as a worshiper along with everybody else.
Yeah,
And, and
that's the big thing.
yeah, because when you're a performer, you know, the best performances you ever give is when your inner being takes over. You really don't think, you feel and anticipate and just play. And
Mm-hmm.
you can get to that in worship if you intentionally set out for that to happen. And sometimes, you know, people will walk up to you and say, why don't you play more like this person? Or why doesn't it sound more like that group or this or what? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not about imitation. It's about being original
Mm-hmm.
and being faithful to what the Lord has led you to do.
Yeah, honest. That's the word I would say for it.
Yeah, authentic is the word I
Mm-hmm.
like. But yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. Same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know that as a songwriter, when you're expressing your feelings and expressing in honesty what you experienced in life and
Mm-hmm.
that and you're relating it, it actually kind of is easier to write once you get past some of the pain or some of the bad memory or, you know, whatever the feeling was that was associated with it. But
That's
it's the
true. Now
same thing.
it's interesting because I've found also I found that for sure, and I've also found like I've had moments. I remember I had one moment where I couldn't sleep because of this all this stuff going on in my head, all this the situation that I was in, that we were in. It was just really difficult, and I was surprised I couldn't sleep. I just had to get up, and this was the first time in years I got up with a pencil and paper. I just started writing words on paper, and I just kind of let the pain and stuff I was experiencing kind of speak, and I was trying to be honest and not worry about whether this was like expected or normal or whatever. And it turned into a song called Honest is actually one of my favorite songs that I've ever written that I'm hoping to release someday. That's kind of about this idea of like, I'm going to try to bring who I am to God and let him carry it through into this authentic worship experience.
Yeah. Well, and the wonderful thing about worship is if you are honest before God, because that's what he wants. He doesn't want
Mm-hmm.
anything fake. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want anything fabricated or manufactured or anything like that. He
Mm-hmm.
wants our hearts. And, you know, you just go, holy, holy, holy is the Lord, and jump off from there. And
Mm-hmm.
the Spirit will guide you in
Yeah,
some ways. You know, it's
definitely.
really that simple. Just to get the Holy Spirit involved from the very get go. And, you know, there's obvious warfare sometimes that things go on. And before the worship service, you have to bind the spirits and cast anything that is not of the Lord away from the experience that everyone's going to have and just press in. But, you know, I think some pastors will even tell you some of the best sermons they've ever preached were when they just put aside what they had prepared and share from their heart as the Spirit led them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that takes the form of, well, I'm not going to preach. God is telling us we're just going to worship him. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's, I mean, those occurrences, you know, that are so Spirit led are just wonderful. But they don't happen too often, you know, in an organized church where you got 15 minutes for this or 20 minutes for that. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah, you can't schedule it.
yeah,
You can't
exactly.
pencil it in 11:45. We're gonna have the Spirit come down and do an act of something over our congregation.
Yeah, indeed. Well, this is really fascinating. And we've touched on a lot of things, but
Hmm.
what would be the one takeaway you would want someone who's watching this to know about Addison Horner?
Yeah. Um. Well, two things. First off, just to say it again, patreon.com/Addison Horner. If you want to know something about me, it's my name. That's my site. You can check me out there for sure. If you want to learn more about this, because that's where you get a lot more information. But beyond that, what I want to know about me is that I who I am and who God's designed me to be and how he's designed me to interact with the world is to be a storyteller. And so for me, that comes from not just, I have this thing in my head, I'm going to put it out there, but I'm going to take in what's happening in the world. I'm going to take in what God is doing. I'm going to take in all of this stuff. And the role that I found I'm most comfortable in, that I'm most creative in, that I'm most empowered in, is this role of telling stories, and telling stories about life, telling stories about God's love, telling stories about what is happening, and not worrying about, is this pristine, perfectly cut, perfectly framed, but is this honest? Is this real? And is this going to point to God? And it's going to point to the work that he's done in my life, in my heart, and in my experience. So yeah, I'm a storyteller, and that's what I want to convey to people, because if people have stories to tell, this is a world for it. This is a place God's designed for us to tell stories and to get to know each other and to get to know him. So yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, Addison, and we wish you all the best of success as you're moving forward on your musical journey.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that.
we'll look forward to speaking with you again somewhere
That
down the
sounds great.
road. But go ahead, give your website one more time and the Patreon channel, and
Yeah, Patreon, which is patreon.com, patreon.com/Addison Horner, just my name, all one word.
perfect. Well, great. Well, thanks for being with us on today's Christian Music. On behalf of the Christian Songwriters and Musicians International, I'm James Burkhardt, and we'll see you next time on
Take care.
TCM. Okay. Well, I just ended the recording.
Cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, well, this has been great. I hope you enjoyed it, and
Yeah.
I sure did.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, well, we'll be in touch,
That sounds great.
and
Thanks so much,
I'll
James.
send you a link if you want to put this on your social media. Usually the files are too big, so I'll send you a Google Drive link or something where you can get it and put it wherever you want it.
Yeah. Will there be like a podcast link or a YouTube link or something? Is that what's going to work?
Yeah, there should be.
Cool.
CSMI puts it on their website and their
Awesome.
YouTube channel. But yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I'll plan to do that when it comes out.
okay, sounds great. We'll see you later.
Take care, James.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you for listening to today's Christian music broadcast with James Burkhardt. If you'd like to know more about Christian Songwriters and Musicians International, please visit our website at www.csmimusic.org. Have a great day.